Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Lorenzo with Deprogram. We have a special report for you today. I don't know if you heard about the direct action that happened in Germany, which shut down a coal mine, over 1,000 participants. The coal mine was destroying an old-growth forest. There was an encampment there. They took action. They shut it down. We're going to cut to a video really quick to show you kind of what happened. Then we're going to come back with somebody who was actually there and tell you what happened from the ground.
It will be a major act of mass disobedience, where those thousands will enter the mine and put their bodies on the line in front of the huge excavators.
We cannot continue to burn coal if we want to transform our society into a more sustainable one. And I also want to give our political leaders a strong message.
Also Braunkohle ist ja nun mal der Klimakiller Nummer 1 weltweit. Und was hier freigesetzt wird mit der Braunkohle, die hier abgebaut wird, trägt auch da ganz direkt zum Klimawandel bei.
We are going to do our best to enter the mine and to do the best as we can to come as far down as possible. Yeah.
I'm crying, I'm so happy to see you. Hey, you made it, guys.
Yes.
Fuck yeah.
And we're gonna make down there.
Yeah.
Sie befinden sich im Gefahrenbereich der Abraumkante.
I'm both very happy to be here, to have made it inside the pit, but also, it's shocking.
$1,500 people started from the climate camp. They had to flow through police chains. One group is actually sitting on one of the huge diggers, and all the diggers are out of action. So we're very happy we reached what we aimed for.
I think this action very clearly sent a signal to governments and the fossil fuel industry around the world that people are fed up, that people want a future that is free of climate change, and that if you're not going to solve it for us, we're going to solve it for you.
Hey, what's up, everyone? So that was the video that came out from this action. That was courtesy of 350. As you can tell, it was a wide, there was a lot of people there. There was a lot of stuff going on. There was an encampment from what I've heard. We did a little bit, we reached out a little bit, try to bring somebody in to kind of give us a better kind of picture of what went on the ground. And we have Pasco Savido here with us, who was actually at the action. And so what was the action like? What happened? And sort of what was the organizing that led to that moment like?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was great to see that video again, because just seeing that put such a massive smile on my face, to see that many people, 1,500 people in Europe come together and say, actually, we're not putting up with this anymore. So it was hugely empowering to be part of, to say well in advance, to say publicly, we are going to shut down this coal mine, and to get everyone to come along, to go in there, to push through police lines, to be pepper sprayed all over, to have people were beaten quite severely, But the sheer willpower of people made sure we got there. We shut it down. So I mean, I think for everyone involved, the buzz afterwards, the feeling of real success that we've done this, and that we're not just talking about it, we're doing it. We're taking direct action, was really massive. In terms of the organization, that film was by 350, but this was not by any means a 350 action. This came out of grassroots movements in Germany, grassroots movements around Europe, all coming together and really planning. A lot of planning has gone into this. I mean, I was involved back last October around it, and already there were sort of vague plans on the table and groups coming together. So a lot of planning, a lot of coordination, and the camp itself, glad you mentioned it, there was a camp, both a degrowth camp as well as a climate camp, which allowed loads of trainings, which were really important to make sure people were really aware of how to react to the police, what tactics to use, how to make sure we got as far as possible. And then just the interesting thing in the camp, the degrowth camp, brought in people who would never normally be on an action. So you had people pushing through police lines who had barely been on a demonstration before. So you saw this great thing of, we always talk about how do you build your movement, how do you escalate people from one to another to get them more radical and more direct. And this was a huge, huge success and a huge example of how you do that.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, looking at pictures of the encampment, it looks really empowering. So you're saying that the organizing for this, or at least the sort of beginning conversations, went back months, right? And then you had an encampment where you brought people who actually did trainings to teach people sort of like the skills needed to deal with the fact that police will be there. They are going to do things to try to stop you, and how can you deal with that together? And we have images here showing the trains going on and stuff like that. I feel like right now we're in this weird moment where there's a lot of direct actions that are going on against climate change. In the United States, we had the Shell No activists who were trying to blockade the Arctic icebreaker that was trying to get to the Arctic. Recently, Obama okayed that, but again, there's direct action going on there. There's direct action that happened against mines all across South America. And so what do you think leads people to start doing actions like this? And are we living in a moment where it's increasing, or at least that thrust is? Too?
I think there's two elements. I think it's always been going on. When this affects people, where they're living, their environments, this is not a question of, it's not even a question of climate change for many people. It's not, do you believe in climate change or not? Do you want to stop it? It's, am I having my homes destroyed? Can I still make a living? Or is my livelihood being destroyed? If you're looking at Colombia and El Cerrejón, communities being forcefully removed. Here in Germany as well, communities being completely removed from and completely displaced. Where the climate camp was, we were in a ghost town. I mean, it's really eerie right next to the climate camp, all these empty buildings. So I think, of course, it's been going on a long time, and it's being really linked to environmental justice issues, where often the most vulnerable and the poorest are the ones hardest hit. But what we're seeing now is, I think, a wider resistance. What we saw here is people who didn't live there coming to show solidarity, taking part, and really upping the ante. And there's definitely climate change and the increasing evidence of climate change and people's awareness is playing into this. But I think in the past, people used to think governments are going to sort this out. Don't worry, leave it to them. They'll do it. And we've seen that's clearly not the case. Governments have dithered for what we've got coming up in December in Paris, the 21st UN climate talks, COP21. So for 21 years, governments have been really not acting, as particularly governments in the global north, the US, Canada, and in Europe, our own governments. So frankly, if governments aren't going to do it, then that leaves us. And if we're not prepared to do it, then no one will. So it's really sort of a time where we have to say either step up or be forgotten. And there's too much on the line for most people here to be forgotten and to give up. So we're seeing more and more people take action. And I'm really hoping this is something that continues. What the Rhineland action, what this big mine and invading this big mine did was to try and be a stepping stone towards the climate talks this winter, but also far beyond it. And I think 350 and many others have already announced that in April, May, there's going to be a huge number of actions against these what are called carbon time bombs, these sort of big hotspots of carbon around the world, to take action on infrastructure to show that we're not going to allow big business and governments to carry on with business as usual.
Yeah, so, listening to that, I think, I look at Europe, and it's always interesting because Europe's sort of like Greenpeace and 350, sort of at least the actions they'll join and put their names on, like they're way more direct than they usually have been in the United States. The United States, I've always felt like those organizations are sort of raising money here, and then they do actions everywhere else. But now the Shell No protest kind of changed that a little bit because there was direct action that happened from like a big name green who's like, all right, we'll put our name on this. So that seems to be changing, which I think is interesting. But also that look, what you said, where you have these thousands of people coming to show solidarity to stop because, yeah, there's climate change, but there's also this mine that's destroying people's homes. And this is like where climate change is happening is at this mine that exists here. And people are going to like this sort of the spot or the place where these events are happening, where these mines are occurring, where people's homes are being literally destroyed and wiped away. And so it's interesting to see this kind of, I feel like we're living in a transition where these things are starting to happen now, which is interesting. It was great. What do you, I mean, I feel like there's momentum in the climate movement just from, again, I'm like the observer in the background who's like watching everything. But I'm wondering what is the COP21 protests? What are they going to look like? If they're going to be protests there, I assume they're going to be. They're also in France, where there's been a lot of actions. There was the recent. There's just a lot of actions against just climate, or just environmental justice issues. So, what do you think that the COP21 protests will look like?
I think there's going to be various protests. There's going to be. I mean, because we have to. I think the main thing that everyone's said is what we don't want to happen is a repeat of Copenhagen in 2009. Where everyone goes on the streets and calls on leaders to deliver a great climate deal and will save the planet. No, I think everyone's accepted that in Paris, what goes on in the negotiations is going to be a disaster. And I think we can accept that. We've known that for many years. The power of the fossil fuel industries and big business mean we're not going to get the changes we want to see. So the question is for Paris, and it's been interesting. I've been involved in many of the sort of processes in terms of organizing, trying to bring grassroots groups together for Paris. And then the question is, can we bring what happens in the Rhineland to Paris? Can we bring what happens in Colombia? Can we bring the pipeline struggles in the US to Paris and really make sure it's not a moment where we call on our leaders to sign a great deal. It's a moment where we say, this is what we're fighting, we've had enough, and we're going to take action into our own hands. So in Paris, there will be, of course, some big demos at the beginning, but really this is about taking direct action. So there's all sorts of things organized, from something called the Climate Games, where Paris turns into, you could call it a gaming field or a battlefield, and teams of affinity groups take direct action against lobby targets and corporate targets, embassies, all sorts, to really highlight the problem, but in a slightly more fun spirit, whilst taking direct action. And then a big award ceremony at the end. We're hoping to have the biggest act of mass civil disobedience in France, in Paris, happening at the end after the COP. So after the negotiations finished, we as people, as citizens, as movements, want to make sure we have the final words. So we don't just sit there, watch them sign a deal, and as they fly off into the distance, we want to make sure that we are out on the streets saying, actually, what you've signed here doesn't represent us, is not legitimate, and we will not endorse it. And instead, we're going to go and we're going to implement our own solutions and have the final word, and make sure that when we go away, what we're able to say is something that it doesn't stop here in Paris. In the following months, we're going to keep on taking over mines. We're going to keep on shutting down infrastructure. We're going to keep on making sure that the real causes of climate change, which is the fossil fuel industry and the corporate power behind it, is not allowed to have its way. So I think Paris could be this really transformational moment where we are able to really come together. We're able to look beyond the negotiations and stop, I don't want to be denigrating towards anyone who still has hope in them, but the reality is we've seen it doesn't work. So we have to move away from, and hopefully Paris can be a real stepping stone towards after Paris, because I think everyone has to be looking at after Paris. And what I'm expecting from the streets of Paris will be exactly that.
Yeah. I was going to say that. Well, first of all, there's people who believe in obviously that process, and they're working within that process. But I wanted to point out that after the Shell No protest, where these people took direct action, they dropped down, they blocked this icebreaker. Like the next day, it was just all these petitions to ask Obama to stop the Arctic drilling from happening, and then on Monday he signed it saying go drill. So it's like it's been pointed out over and over again. These people don't seem to be listening, or at least their interests are vastly different than people who are trying to survive, within the world we've been given. But So yeah, so the COP21 protest sound like it could be pretty big. To be there with that many people from all over the world.
I mean, looking at these pictures, 5 different countries represented. We had people. I was actually flabbergasted that we got there first of all. I mean, in a small tunnel, we had no right. This was where we were supposed to. I'm in one of the groups, and the immenseness of it. How small you are as an individual. 1,000 people got into that mine. You know, that's man one digger to get in there to be able to shut every single. We all got pepper spray to the ground, but to have. I mean, it's sort of but to really have that many people.
We just dropped out. Wait a second, see if he comes back and looks at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. It's just, it looked like Mordor, especially in the morning. This is us, you know, you're running through and you go 288, which is, I think, to dig up the earth, you know, to really rip out the soul of our planet. And there you are, this tiny person, but enough of you to really do something. So I think from that, everyone can keep on building and keep on going forward. And just to say once we all got taken away, we got put in buses by the police, sat outside police station for hours. But the guy next to me, he had never done anything. None of his friends were in.
No. One moment, let's see if he comes back. I'm just trying to go through this day of action that happened in Germany. It looks really crazy. Here you go.
Yeah, so just the guy next to me had never done an action. So if we can get people who had never done actions before to come and do this, to put their body on the line, I think we're really getting somewhere.
Yeah, and then this just really quick, like that's really important too, like with people experiencing this, I think, and that's why I asked, like, what did it feel like? Because I don't think people really get that sort of understanding that when all this, you know, when you plan something with some friends and you go do something together, it usually feels really good. And a lot of people don't have that experience because they're not sort of organizing themselves with a lot of folks and be like, oh, we can do all sorts of amazing things. But I wanted to also specifically ask about, was there like a legal strategy that people get charged? Like, are people in jail? Did people get out of jail? I sadly forgot to mention that the last time I spoke to the Shall No protester who was arrested, and then it's important to know that there are consequences, and I was kind of wondering what the fallout, if there is any, from these actions might be.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely, I was really impressed by the legal strategy they used. So in Germany, there's a huge issue around giving your identity. And many people try and say anonymous. And if you're anonymous, you can then get taken away. There's someone actually in prison for refusing to give their identity. So there was, in the camp, they posed it as you could either go anonymous. There's good reason to go anonymous. Of course, if you want to give your ID, you can. But for everyone who chose to go anonymous, they set up a system where they gave you a number. So the legal team knew exactly how many people were taken, and so instead of giving your name, you just had a number, and that was held within either your affinity group, or you could give it to the legal team. So it was really impressive, and I've never been in an action in Germany before where I've not given ID, and it worked incredibly. But they've never had that many people refusing to give their ID. The police didn't know what to do. I mean, it was amazing watching the first person who said, "I've got no passport, I've got no ID." They had to call their bosses. They had enormous forms to fill out. They didn't know what to do with these forms. They had nothing to fill in. And in the end, we got taken away in buses. We were supposed to be processed, and we all just got let out, in fact. So of course, there are consequences. First of all, many people got pepper sprayed. I mean, quite badly. The police you're seeing in this video, the police used RWE vehicles. RWE run the mine. It's a big electricity utility. And they used their vehicles with police in the back, and they would sort of scooch up behind you, roll down their window, and spray people in the face with pepper spray. And then as we got further and further, more and more police lines, and in the end, I think most people, myself included, got very badly pepper sprayed in the face and ended up on the floor. But then we got kettled for about 4 or 5 hours. Then we got put into buses, and then we got sort of driven around various places. But after 12 hours, the police are supposed to let you go, and they just didn't have the capacity to really process everybody. So they just, rather than actually processing us, they just dropped us at a train station. So whilst there are consequences for sure, what was amazing to see, the solidarity from everyone saying we're going to be anonymous, meant that we actually had one over on the police. And so everyone got away. Well, maybe I'm not so anonymous now, but I was tweeting from it anyway. But everyone got away scot-free, with their own identities intact. And I think it really showed the German police and police everywhere that people can stand up for this, because when they get you by yourself, they say, oh, if you don't do this, we're going to put you in jail. If you don't give us your ID, you're never going to get out of here. But if thousands of people say we're not going to give you our identities, there's nothing they can do. It's a huge legal nightmare for them. So it's been a really, really effective tactic, and one hopefully we can reproduce elsewhere.
Great. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that's really good to see that that this organization also took that into account, that people that might be arrested and they planned for it and they did some research and had a strategy. And sometimes I feel like people don't realize that all these sort of movements and actions there's this work being done. So it's great to see that work went well, and there was a whole team who was taking care of that. I wanted to do, what was the last thing I wanted to do before we left here? I kind of feel like we kind of covered that really well. How does someone get involved in direct action, or if these protests are going to be happening in France are ramping up, where can people find information about that stuff? Because I'm even curious. Like I said, I want to try to get there to do this there, but where do you get started?
Yeah, I mean, I think of course there's all sorts of different audiences, no? From people who might have seen it on TV, you might have seen the march in New York, you'd be interested, okay, how can I join? And there's the sort of big organizations to go to, like 350 or VAZ, but those people who might have had more experience already might want to take more action. Then there's definitely things like the climate games. So you can go to climategames.net. And that's not just for people in Paris, that's for people worldwide. So you can be in Minnesota, you can be anywhere you like and take part. You can go and shut down an oil refinery near you. I mean, I wouldn't advocate that, of course, but I'm sure it'd be great fun. And take action in any way you can, because ultimately this is not, whilst Paris will be a key focal point, it's making sure we're taking actions in places that are important to us too. So I think it is about showing the entirety of it, showing that we're a global movement. We're not just focused on the sort of big NGOs. We're not just focused on people who have the means to get to Paris. We really get everywhere. But if you want specific information on Paris mobilizations and what's happening during those 2 weeks, go to the Coalition Climat 21. It's the French coalition. They've got a website. I think it's Coalition Climat 21. .org. Check out climategames.net. And there will be, I think, maybe there's been a few announcements already, but there should be quite a few announcements on the whole suite of actions happening over the 2 weeks of negotiations, from the big march in the beginning. There'll be marches all around the world, in fact, decentralized, Paris, not New York, I think everywhere. I think there might be some in Berlin, all over on the 28th and 29th. Then there's going to be a climate games round on the first Monday. There's going to be stuff happening the middle weekend, and then in the last week it's supposed to be actions all over the place in Paris, finalizing with a big mass act of civil disobedience. So there's a lot planned, but I think a lot of this is about what people are willing to do, how far they're willing to go. So I mean, the best thing is to talk to people around you, talk to friends. If you've done this stuff before, great, see what you can do. If not, definitely I would even say 350. I mean, as a good starting point, if you've never done an action, to really get the tools and get the sort of inspiration.
All right, good. 1 more second. See, he's been popping in and out a little bit.
So
we're
to take that.
And then,
so to take that step, yeah.
So that's a lot of really good information. So thank you for that. We'll make sure we'll be throwing that a little bit together in an article. Just one for you, just you specifically. Like, is there a way for somebody to follow up with you if you want to give out like your Twitter handle? You don't have to, obviously, but
yeah,
if there's any information you want to give folks, now would be the time, I guess.
Sure, definitely. So my Twitter is @Pasco, PASCOE Sabido, SABIDO, and definitely tweet me. Or I work for Corporate Europe Observatory, and we look at corporate lobbying in Brussels. I also look at corporate lobbying on the UN climate talks. We're going to be doing a lot leading up to COP21. So check out our website, corporateeurope.org, and we'll be having a specific sort of Paris COP21 section coming soon, and you can see all the sort of work we're doing there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, and we're glad you can share that information with us, and we'll do our best to share it with everyone else. So thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Pleasure.
Oh, well, I got to do an outro. I totally forgot. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the special report. Again, we were just trying our best to have that during the live show, but it was a time frame difference. But that was a direct action that happened in Germany, and you can see that it is part of a movement that's building towards the COP21 protest in France. And yeah, a lot of information there, and I'm really just happy we could pull it together for everyone. So thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight if you're going to be at the show. Have a great day.